Final Hour Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Brian Hayes, Frankie Corrado. Best Bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour in the Argos game tonight. Argos Riders up on TSN tonight. And Argos 2-1. The Riders are 3-0 out of the gate, but got a couple of backup quarterbacks going, and the Argos are actually laying points. They're laying 4.5 on the road tonight.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that'll be a packed house, man. You get a 3-0 start out there in the prairies. They get popping out there.
Well, they're always it always is. That team gets so much support. That's got to be. I mean, as far as buildings in that league, that's got to be a tough place to play.
It's an awesome field, man. They built it recently, and it's just a state of the art, awesome spot. So Kevin Kilbane will join us here in a moment as well, where we've got Copa America, Argentina, Ecuador tonight, I believe, and it'll be Canada and Venezuela tomorrow, and the quarters in the Euros. Like, I can't think of a better four-pack in two matches tomorrow, starting at noon on TSN. Spain versus the host Germany, which will be electric. Obviously, a long history between those two countries. And then the 3 p.m. match is Portugal versus France. So you have Ronaldo, who announced this will be his final Euro, which, I mean, naturally, the next one's in 4 years. I can't imagine he continues to play for long. And I don't know if anyone's going to hold him to that, right? He was still playing in 4 years and in good shape, and they want him on the team. He's going to say no? You know, no. Announcing you're not going to play. What does it really matter if in 4 years you decide, actually, I'm still good? They're going to hold you to it? Nope, sorry, you retired. You said you're not going to play. You can't play.
How old is he again?
He'd be in his
late
mid
30s,
to late 30s.
Yeah, like he's getting up there. But I don't know, that guy, for some reason, like, he looks way younger. He acts way younger. It's like if anyone was going to be able to do it, it feels like it would be him.
Yeah, he's 39. So is it unlikely? Maybe he pulls a Tom Brady. Maybe he pulls a Brady. I mean, 39 in soccer to begin with is pretty crazy. But between him and Messi, you know, Messi's not a spring chicken either, and this guy keeps playing, and Argentina's the number one ranked team in the world.
Yeah.
And you know, in large part because of him.
The Copa America, you know, like Canada, I think, you know, gets to this point. I don't know if it was necessarily expected by a lot of people, although I'm sure internally they would have had those expectations. But heard Duthie talking about this morning. Like, it's not like Venezuela is some team that's, you know, been there and done that, and like they're relatively new to this whole situation as well. So Canada, like, they're in a good spot. Despite the fact that goal scoring hasn't really come easy to them, they've situated themselves pretty nicely. Big time, man. And they're playing at Cowboy Stadium too, man. Jerry's house, like that's down at AT&T, Arlington, Texas. Like that's going to be a crazy scene. And I'm sure there will be a number of Canadians. I would guess, you know, Venezuela is going to be well represented as well. I don't know how many Americans are just kicking around thinking, I'll go check this match out. But it should be a good match. And listen, we all know what's plaguing this team right now is offense. You know, that's the issue, is they've scored one goal in the tournament, and yet they're through. And they got the news from Tajon Buchanan yesterday that he suffered a really substantial leg injury, and he's going to be out for a long time. Yeah. And I wonder what that does to the camp. You know, like, how does it affect? I saw Kyle Larin being interviewed last night by Matthew Shinetti. You could tell he was really emotional. And, you know, Buchanan's a good player. He's been with the team for a while. You get a gruesome injury in training. Like, that's tibia, that's emotionally draining. Like, it's a tibia. Like, that's a very serious injury. But I would say in something like this, that's got to be the rallying point for this team. Like, he's obviously been around them. They've put a lot of work into this. And think about what that program, Hayes, has been through, basically from the World Cup to now. Like, the kind of tumultuous off-pitch stuff. You know, there's always a Canada soccer headline. Not a lot of those headlines are very good ones. And the program, you know, as far as the play on the field, deserved a lot more of better headlines. So I think this has the opportunity to be a real rallying point for this group that's been through a lot already.
Yeah, I like that idea. I like that. And you're right. And what Duthie said is right as well. Venezuela, this is not like you're playing some team with monster history at a tournament like this or at a World Cup. You know, and they're going to be tested. You know, the nerves will be tested on both sides. But, the fact that you got through the group stage, again, it's something that the United States can't talk about, Mexico, but Canada is through. And Canada is, every match you get of this magnitude is preparing you for 2026.
Yeah.
And if you can get through Venezuela and you punch your ticket into that next stage of the tournament, I mean, it's so substantial in terms of Jesse March and what his plan is as their new head coach, and Alphonso Davies is a young captain. And I think he's handled it well, too, man. I like the way Davies has been speaking with the media, like his interactions with the media, pre-match, post-match. He's going to figure this out, I think, pretty quickly.
You got to think that the pressure has to lie with Venezuela, doesn't it? Do you not get the feeling that Canada's almost playing with house money here with where they're at? And,
definitely the case up here. I don't know in terms of, outside of our borders, because of the history of the national team, prior to 22 in Qatar, it was like, they weren't even knocking on the door. They never go to the Copa America. So, yes, from that standpoint, because considering they have no history in this tournament, that they got through the group stage and kind of survived against Argentina. It's 0-0 at the half. It's like moral victories. But I think that's something that this team needs to change. And I think a lot of people within the soccer community in the country, based on what I'm reading and watching, they want that to come to an end, right? They want it to, at some point, you got to take the next step where it's no longer moral victories, no longer, hey, we scored, that was great. If you're going to be bold and you're going to have confidence, like at some point you got to start knocking people out here and go as far as you can without having to explain anything.
How do you get there? You have this crop of guys led by Davies. You need to develop the next crop as well. Like this program needs to kind of turn things over every 4 years so that there's no lapses in what Canada is from one tournament to the other. And if the kind of grassroots leads into, wherever people are playing after that, whether it's collegiate or, moving into MLS and going overseas and playing whatever academies these guys go play at, like it has to kind of be a seamless thing so this can kind of grow, because it can't just be, you play a World Cup, you play a Copa, and those guys move on and there's no next crop. There has to be, more coming through the pipeline.
Yes, you want that sustained success, and you're not going to make the World Cup every single time. There's very few teams do that. Brazil, Argentina, the big
not
European
even Italy.
Teams.
Italy can't even make it every World Cup. Give me a break.
You're not going to get there every year, but you do not want. We can't have another 40-year break. You can't go 86, 22, and then obviously 26 because we're hosting, and then we're getting back there in 1954 or something. You can't have a break that's that long. You need to find a program here that is just constantly churning out talent, and I know that that's always been a difficult topic to tackle because of our grassroots system, the way Soccer Canada operates, the way the economics work. There's a lot of politics in play. It just never feels like our system's been set up for that, for the ability to push people through constantly and always be knocking on the door.
But
so you
sometimes
get wave after wave after wave.
Sometimes it just takes one thing. Like it just takes the World Cup, or it takes some success for people or young players around here to kind of see we can actually do that. Like you can conceptualize it, because I don't know, over the years, like grew up in Woodbridge, know a lot of guys that played soccer. You know how many guys played at high, minor levels and they just fell off because they would just say, no, you can't go anywhere with it. Well, you can go somewhere with it. And I think like these teams and what they're doing should show young players that something can actually come of it. It doesn't mean that, you're just, it's a dead end.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a club level, like the amount of, Canadians playing in Europe, that's substantial too, right? Like every single year, there's more and more guys and more like players who are playing like impactful roles on very good teams. And that goes a long way as well. That's what I think Davies can represent. I think Jonathan David can represent. I think Tajon Buchanan was moving in that direction. This idea of getting over and getting on these prominent European teams and playing in Champions League and having Canadian representatives there, that goes a long way as well in terms of getting the grassroots and giving Canadian kids a dream and a goal that they can reach beyond just playing for the national team. So it is Canada, Venezuela tomorrow. You've got Argentina and Ecuador tonight, and the quarters of the Euros tomorrow, and it's going to be electric tomorrow on TSN. I can guarantee you that. And, man, you'll see a lot tomorrow. You've seen him a lot for the better part of a month. Here's our good buddy Kevin Kilbane. How you doing, Kevin?
How's it going, guys? How are you feeling today?
Well, we're feeling well. We're looking forward to tomorrow. Why don't we begin with the Euros? I mean, I don't think you can beat this. Like, if you're putting together a schedule and you're trying to forecast what would be the best possible turnout for a quarterfinal, Spain, Germany, Portugal, France. Does it get any better than that?
Well, it doesn't get much better, does it? It depends which way you're leaning, whichever team you're actually following when it comes to the Euros, doesn't it? But in terms of superpower nations within the soccer system, absolutely, yeah. Two incredible games. That's the way I think it's going to be. The way that they'll pan out. If you look at the Spain and Germany game to start with, both sides have impressed. Maybe Germany slipped up maybe in the last round of the group, when maybe one or two changes should have been made. But Spain have been just a powerhouse all the way through. Probably the most impressive team of the tournament so far, I would say. And then France, Portugal, who both have probably stuttered through a little bit up to this stage. They've not been great. And I suppose maybe if you're Didier Deschamps, the French coach, that's the way that he coaches his team. It's the way that he likes to do things. He keeps things very tight. He doesn't concede too many. And he feels with the star power that they've got within their side, they can go and beat sides. And then, of course, then you're looking to Portugal, and invariably it's going to be about Ronaldo, as it was in the last round, isn't it? So we've got star names, star teams, and in terms of, as you say, impact and power in terms of teams, we've got everything, I think, tomorrow. I think it's going to be a great day.
If you were France, how concerned would you be about the lack of offense? 3 goals scored, and 2 of them are own goals, and 1 is a penalty. Like, how do you explain that?
It's the way that Didier Deschamps sets them up, and I'd have to say that even if we look, say, in the other half of the draw, you look at England, they've got equally as much talent in attack, and they're pretty much the same. They don't score a lot of goals. They keep things tight at the back, and it's almost as if they're trying to grind the way through the tournament without conceding goals first and foremost, when they've arguably got the greatest player in world football right now. They've probably got 2 or 3 of the best attacking players in world football right now as well. And of course, then in midfield, you've got almost the resurgence of N'Golo Kante in this tournament again. So in midfield and in attack, they've got superstars, but Didier Deschamps likes to rely on the defensive unit of the side. Don't get broke down very easily. Don't concede goals. And as I say, he expects his maybe attackers to deliver in key moments. Hasn't necessarily been that way throughout for France. They have been quite disappointing to watch, but I still feel that they're going to take some stock in France. It's not necessarily a case of just saying, well, look, they haven't scored enough goals. They're not in a great position. I think Didier Deschamps will actually be quite happy with the way that they've gone right now, or the way that they've been.
With Kevin Kilbane, the Euros continuing tomorrow, and that first bracket we just mentioned, the other side of the bracket, will take place on Saturday, where England's got Switzerland and Netherlands will play Turkey. And the English are lucky to be here, considering what happened in the last round, where they score in injury time, and Bellingham, that was a beautiful, beautiful goal. And then Kane scores early into extra time, and they end up holding on to win that match. But this seems to be the way it always works with England. Like, they're in a position where you look at the bracket, you're like, okay, you should be able to get through this. Like, it's opened up. The seas have parted here for them. Yet they always make it difficult on themselves. Do you assume they will do that again and suffer self-inflicted wounds, or do you think they'll overcome this history and actually win something here?
Well, they're not going to get a better chance. I think that's the way you look at it. If you look at the draw, Netherlands were quite impressive in the last round. Switzerland were impressive in beating in Spain. So the Switzerland game is going to be tough for them first and foremost, I think. And then obviously you're looking at a semi-final against Netherlands, Turkey, of course themselves. But if you look at it, the draw, the way that it's panned out to a final, it wouldn't be any better for England. It went quite well for them 3 years ago, and then they met Italy in the final, and Italy managed to overcome them on penalties. I feel as though they're playing way worse this tournament. There's no real cohesion going forward. There's no real creativity going forward for them. And it did take a moment of magic, as you say, from Jude Bellingham to get them out of a hole, really, in the last round. It looked as though they were done. That was it. They were going home. But in fairness to them, they haven't conceded all that many. They don't necessarily go into games to go and beat a side. That's the way that I would look at it. They almost try to contain. We'll be quite happy if we don't concede. We get a 0-0 tie, and we'll be quite happy going to extra time and penalties if necessary. And I feel as though Gareth Southgate, the coach, might need to adopt a different style. Just to open up those attacking players and try to be a bit more expansive going forward, because realistically, they're way better than Switzerland. They've got much more talent than them. But Switzerland have got a great system that they play well in. Everyone knows the roles within the side, and they're hard to beat. So maybe if you'd have said before the tournament, it would have easily been a 70-30 game in England's favour. I think it's more finely balanced now. It's definitely a 50-50 game.
Should this be the last time we see Ronaldo playing internationally for Portugal?
I think it might be his last Euros. Does he hold on for another 2 years and go for another World Cup? I don't know. Do you know, watching him, you know the way that Ronaldo was, the dynamic movement that he had, the real pace to get away from defenders, you know, his ability to leap over the top of players and score incredible goals. We haven't seen that from him in this game, in this tournament, We haven't necessarily seen a player that's really confident in his own ability and the surroundings that he's playing in as well. I think the tournament has looked a little bit or a step too far from. That's the way that I'm looking at it. And look, many might say, look, who am I to say? Ronaldo's one of the greatest ever, the greatest goal scorer that's ever played the game. So you can't argue with his record and his stats. But when you're watching him, I just feel as though that he's hindering this Portugal side. I think there's better attacking players, and Ronaldo would be better served coming off the bench, coming on for 20 minutes or maybe for an extra time if necessary. I just feel as though that Roberto Martinez is not using him to his capabilities in this tournament and playing him every game, every 90, every 120 as it was in the last game, in the last last round. It just, I don't know, I just don't think it serves him now. I just don't feel as though that he's got the dynamic power and maybe the energy levels to last the full 90 at the incredible levels that he was showing maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
With Kevin Kilbane. So on the Copa America side of things, Canada's got Venezuela tomorrow, but they got hit with some pretty nasty news and pretty nasty injury to Tajon Buchanan, who suffered a really gruesome leg injury, and he's out. You've been on so many camps throughout your career, whether it's a club team or the national team. Can you take us inside the room when something like that happens in training, too? It's a practice. It's not on the game.
Yeah.
It's not during a game. He suffers an injury like that. Like, how do you overcome that? Because I'm sure it's been a really emotional 48 hours for Canada.
Yeah, it's so rare that it happens in practice, in training, simply because of the intensity levels. I think that's the way that it is. I think you'll have, usually what you'd have a block of training in preparation for a game where high intensity levels would be going right through the whole session itself. So it is quite rare when it happens, and because it's rare, it makes it even more traumatic when it actually does happen. I remember it only happening within a training session once with me, where I actually saw a leg break. I saw a couple when I was actually playing. I think the traumatic side is more. You see someone with a leg break like that, like it's happened. I'm sure that the players probably initially would have felt, obviously distraught, the pain of Tajon Buchanan, given where he is and at the stage of his career he's at right now. He's looking to establish himself at Inter Milan, looking to kick on to the next level from there. And of course, maybe the Copa wasn't going too great for him before the last game where he came on against Chile, and he really made a difference against Chile. So I think you more think of the person. It becomes more humanised, I think, when you're a teammate and it's happened on the training field. So I think the players will obviously be trying, I feel, once the initial 24 hours of that traumatic feeling leaves you, or as much as it can leave you, I feel as though that you're almost got a mindset, we have to do this for him now. We've got to really be going out. We've got to be looking at Tajon as maybe a little bit of inspiration for how we can approach this Venezuela game.
As far as the game goes itself, Canada versus Venezuela, Canada pretty new onto the scene here as far as playing in these big tournaments. And, the same kind of goes for Venezuela. It's not like they're some soccer powerhouse. As far as both these teams go, who would be feeling more pressure in a game like this?
Well, in all honesty, I know kind of the big question or the big things that have been levelled at Canada is they've not been scoring goals. But if you've watched the games, they've been quite comfortable, I feel, in the games. So yes, I know you maybe argue that they've been down to 10 men in 2 games, but they never looked like they were going to lose any of those games. 1 or 2 great saves from Max Capol that maybe kept them in the Chile game, and maybe even late on that incredible save that he made. But if you're looking at the games as a whole, you're not really feeling that Canada have been under too much stress and too much. They've had a runaround. I would probably say in layman's terms, have they had a runaround in the games? Apart from spells against Argentina, but I think against Argentina they showed real capabilities of opening Argentina up and creating lots of chances. So I don't feel as though that there'll be any real fear from Canada. I don't think there'll be real nervousness coming into the game of real trepidation. The only thing that I would say is that they've never been in this position before. They've never once been in a major tournament, a knockout stage, major tournament game. So it can get to you. And I was only in a knockout game once in my career, and the build up to the game is huge. And it's everyone when I was involved in it is talking around positions, like an outside influence. Should he be playing? Should he be starting? Should they be? Are they a natural starter in the team? So if it's someone that's saying something about you personally, then you're obviously looking at that. I think you've just got to block out all the outside noise. In terms of Venezuela themselves, you're right in saying it. I don't think there's anything to really fear there from Canada's point of view. I think Canada can approach it like they've approached many other games throughout the tournament, and maybe even beyond that in qualification to the World Cup and even at the World Cup. I think they just need to approach it in a way where let's go out and just play our game. I don't think Venezuela are actually as good as Chile. And the way that they played for spells against Chile, I think, suggests to me that they can go and win the game. So I don't think they've got too much to fear.
That's the plan. Let's see how it plays out tomorrow night, and we'll see how the Euros play out as well. We look forward to seeing you on TSN tomorrow and throughout the weekend, Kevin. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks very much. Cheers, guys.
There's Kevin Kilbane. There's someone in the background. We appreciate that.
Love it. Yeah.
So Kevin and the boys, they'll be ready to rock come tomorrow, again, for the quarters of the Euro and also for Copa America tomorrow night.
Those guys have been putting in shifts, man. The
great,
Euro,
though.
Canada, they're all over it.
So
They've
passionate
been doing a great
between
job.
him and Caldwell, and Atiba Hutchinson's been awesome, and he's obviously got, you talk about skin in the game. Like, that guy's Mr. Canada when it comes to the national team. And Luke Wildman's been doing awesome. Duffy's in and out. It's great. Everyone's crushing it, man. Shinetti. Everybody.
I just love the fact that they'll let it fly, man. They do not hold anything back, and it's dreadful. It's dreadful. No, like we're gonna let you know.
Yeah. I love it. All right. Speaking of dreadful, the Blue Jays lost again today.
Nice.
They are. Listen. What else are you going to say anymore? What can you say? I mean, they're 9 games under 500. The last time they were at any point 9 games under 500 was back in 2019, and they lost 95 games that season. So, brace for it. There's a very good chance they're going to lose 90-plus games this season the way that they're playing. And it might actually get worse before it gets better. And, the big picture conversations, it's arrived. What do they do with the trade deadline? What do they do with the front office? What do they do with this team, the vision, the plan, all of it? Richard Griffin will join us to help us break that down. And we'll get to our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, best bets later in the hour. Our buddy Richard Griffin will join us here in a moment. Jays losing this afternoon. Now they're off to Seattle. And it's been an interesting year for the Jays. Interesting week. And listen, they took 2 of 4 against the Yankees, and the Yankees are a mess right now. The Yankees have lost 14 of their last 19 games. So, not suggesting that's worse than the Jays, in the position they're in, but I get the sense down in New York, they're starting to freak out. They lost to Cincinnati today at Yankee Stadium. Baltimore's past them now. Like they had a pretty, not a substantial lead on the Orioles, but they've been up on them all season. Now Baltimore's got a 2.5 game lead on them.
Don't you get the sense, though, that the Yankees could actually turn it around? Like, that would be, yes, it's a big slide, but the Jays slide has been, last year into this year, I guess, if you want to call it that. I don't know. I feel like the Yankees could turn that around much quicker.
Yeah, I don't think the Yankees are going to slide like out of the playoffs or out of contention. They're still 54 and 35. They've given themselves such a buffer, but this is a pretty big fall off. And Baltimore, I think, is the team to beat in the American League East. And I think we've talked about it this week. They've got just enough pitching and just enough hitting in New York, but they don't have a lot of depth. Like, they really don't have a lot of depth in terms of the rotation, bullpen, the bats further down the lineup. You suffer an injury or two, and this is with Judge being like the clear-cut, best hitter, best player in baseball right now, putting up astronomical numbers, and they're still losing a lot of ball games.
It was like that when Judge had his 62 home run season,
right.
Wasn't it? It was Judge carrying the mail for that team. There wasn't much happening around him, and if it wasn't for him, that team would not have had the success that they had. Like, Stanton was doing nothing, and it was all Aaron Judge. And I don't know, like, when it comes to that AL East, the Yankees are kind of just, they're always going to be who they are. If the Jays go down this road of, I don't know, what do you want to call it, stripping it down, rebuilding, it's hard enough being in the AL East, but if there's no prospects in sight for you, man, that can turn into a lot of years of being in the basement of the AL East.
Well, that's why I think you look at Baltimore, and that's kind of what you might be hoping for if you blow it up. But it took them a long time. Like, we all know what happened. The wild card game in 16, Edwin walked them off. Baltimore shook hands and said, see you later. We're going to be awful for years. The Jays weren't far behind them. Like, the Jays were going to be awful, too, and pretty quickly. But it took Baltimore a while. It took them from 16 to last season. So do the math. What was that, 7 years, 6, 7 seasons of them being awful?
Do the math.
Horrible and horrendous. Yet now look what they are, and they look like they're poised to be electric for like a decade. Here's our buddy Richard Griffin joining us here, Blue Jays writer, griffsthepitch.com. What's happening, Griff?
Hey, Frankie, what's up?
Well, we're trying to figure out what the Blue Jays do here. I mean, they're 9 games under 500. Last time they were 9 games under 500 was back in 2019. They went on to lose 95 games that season. I don't see how it's going to get better. Could it stay the same? Do you think it'll get worse? Where do you see this going?
Well, tell me about that poll that you were quoting earlier in the show about 93%. What did they say?
Yeah, 93% of the fans online want to see this completely blown up, scorched earth from top to bottom.
Well, I tell you, the blowing this thing up, I guarantee that 90% of the 93% don't buy tickets, aren't going to buy tickets in the Rogers Banner Club or the TD Lounge or the Blueprint Club, none of which have opened so far. And if you're going to lose 100 games, which Frankie mentioned, I think that's a real possibility. To win 90 games, this team has to go 51-24 the rest of the year. Those numbers don't seem that daunting if you've got a good team. To lose 100, they go 23-52. And those numbers seem realistic if you're going to blow up this team, because there's nobody in the minor leagues waiting to jump in and take over and compete and develop a core into the future, into next year. If you get rid of the guys on the team right now, there's nobody ready to step in. And that's where you lose 100 to 110 games. That's where you don't sell any of your new private clubs. That's where you don't sell any inventory of the new renovated seats behind home plate. And it's a disaster. And I don't think ownership will stand for that.
Well, okay, so you mentioned ownership. Like, they've obviously opened the piggy bank, and they've allowed Shapiro and Atkins to spend money. Like, does that just continue then? Like, here, let's just put more money into it and see if we can fix it that way? Like, what is the right course of action?
Well, teams that normally blow it up at the trade deadline are teams that are strapped for money, strapped for payroll, and this ownership is certainly not in that regard. I mean, they're ninth, broken into the top 10 in Major League payroll. Of course, they got the 24th best record, so that doesn't jive. They're going to have to do something about that. But they need to keep some of those core players. They could trade, for instance, trading Bo at the trade deadline isn't as much of a leap as people might imagine. You can get something solid back for Bo that could help either this year or definitely in 2025. But to trade Bo and Vlad would be a disaster. I don't think they could do that. This is not a blow-it-up situation. This is a hold on to some core pieces and try and build around them in the offseason, because there's no way that this group, the way they're playing, is going to put together that 51-24 that we're talking about to get to 90 wins.
No, there's no chance. That's not that ship has sailed. I mean, they're 9 games under 500. We're into July. It's over. But it's interesting. Like, you talk about the core pieces, and if we're talking about simply the bats, putting pitchers aside here, if you're talking about bats, for quite some time, those core pieces have been Bichette, Vladdy, Springer, and I'm curious who else would be considered that? Like, what if Springer is what he is and he's got 2 years left at big money? I don't know what's going to happen with Bo in the future, but he's not hitting like a core piece. He can be marketed like one. He plays a prominent position in terms of being a core piece, but his numbers speak for themselves. It is nowhere close to good enough. Is Varsho the guy we're talking about here? Are we talking Danny Jansen? It's certainly not Alejandro Kirk. Like, who is the core that you could keep around and say we kept these 5 guys because that makes sense, and everything else we can replace? Who would they be, Rich?
Well, the only constant on this team day to day is the starting rotation, your top 4 men in the starting rotation. And they're obviously the most desirable guys in trade at the deadline. You've got Kikuchi, whose contract expires at the end of this season. Bassett expires at the end of next year. Gosman's got a couple more seasons. So those are 3 guys that if you're going to blow it up, can bring you something in return. But I think that those are core pieces other than Kikuchi. I might be willing to trade Kikuchi and Bo at the deadline. Springer, you're going to have to eat the majority, more than 50-60% of that contract if you're going to be able to move him. But, when you talk about guys coming in who's identified as the next generation of core pieces, they're all here right now. You have to decide whether Spencer Horwitz is going to be one of those guys. And it's such an unimpressive group. It's like having a blockbuster movie with no real box office star to attract people. And Vlad, to me, is that guy. Vlad is the box office star that needs to be re-signed.
Well, that's the question. Let me get in here quickly, because Vladdy spoke on that today here, Griff, as I'm sure you're aware. He spoke after the game and said he wants to be here forever. He wants to spend his whole career. He wants to live in Toronto forever, but it's a business. He qualified it with, but it's a business. My read on that is I can't control what the front office is going to do. They may want to move from me, but I want to be here. And he also said, I don't think a lot about money, which I think is rich, because at some point he will be. And someone in his camp certainly is, probably his agent, if not family members. But Vladdy's an intriguing one because, he's the face of the franchise. He's come on hot the last 6 to 8 weeks. What do you see happening there? Like, how do you approach Vladdy if you're Atkins, Shapiro ownership, and at some point he wants to get paid, because that will happen regardless of what he said today?
Well, let's get an average annual value range of where he would fit in, and we'll start from there. You go, Ohtani's on his own planet, so we won't go with him. Judge is making $40 million, Trout 36, then you got Carlos Correa, Rendon, Lindor, and Soto's in there at 31. And I think that the Soto and Vlad contracts are pretty much tied together. And because we all saw as this season approached how, other than Shohei Ohtani, nobody was signing those 7 or 8 year deals anymore. And I think that as spring training approached, there were a lot of big names that were going 3 years with an opt-out, and then free agency again. And I know for a fact that the Players Union is not happy with that. So there's no way that Vlad or anyone else is going to be signed to the traditional free agent contract. Every free agent contract, mega contract, has been guys like Bobby Witt Jr., who they're buying out years of arbitration. He hadn't even reached arbitration. They're buying it out, and then the first 3 or 4 years of free agency with a bunch of options. So to me, they can't do anything now with Vlad. But what they need to do is avoid the huge mistake that J.P. Ricciardi made with Roy Halladay in 2009 when they had to trade him. They were going in a different direction. And the All-Star game was approaching. They sent Roy Halladay to the All-Star game. He was besieged by questions about being traded. You have to be traded. And the Jays didn't send anybody to protect him. He was on his own. He came back. He was soured on the organization. So the point here is that the Blue Jays need to talk to Vlad and his agency, Magnus, and before he goes to the All-Star break so that he knows their game plan, if it is indeed to re-sign him, to re-up him to a significant deal, they need to let him know going to the All-Star game so he doesn't get totally messed up with the line of questioning. And that will be the only line of questioning he gets at the All-Star game. I think he honestly does want to be here, but I don't think he wants to give a hometown discount. So just let him know, lay it out for him, and then negotiate in the offseason because 25, he's still under control.
If there were some moves made, like we're not going to talk about blowing it up, but, some pieces have to come out for some pieces to help you and come in because, like you said, there's not a lot in the cupboard. Like, why should ownership trust this management group to start another cycle with this team when the first cycle kind of ended up where we're at right now?
That's a great question, and there is no history of people being given a second chance to rebuild on a team that never did anything. I mean, they had their opportunities. They took the 2015-16 team that Alex Anthopoulos had built, and it was aging, and they had some contracts that weren't going to be worth it, and they broke it down, and they said, we're rebuilding for 2021. So they had 2017, 18, 19. You mentioned 2019 with the 95 losses and Charlie Montoyo sort of as a caretaker manager. And so that was the rebuild. And 20, they snuck into the shortened season wild card. 21, 22, 23, didn't win anything. And now 24 is turning into a disaster. So you're going to let that same management group control another rebuild? I think you've nailed it. You can't. You need to make changes there. And maybe that's why if you're not going to plan on making a change at general manager mid-season, that you have to also wait until the end of the season so that a new guy looking forward is going to be in control for the next 5 years, and that's the guy you want making moves.
What do you think they could get for Jose Quaz?
Oh, my God. The guy threw to four batters, three pitches to four batters, and the ball never got to the catcher. He walked a guy intentionally. He hit two guys, and a guy lashed a single on the first pitch. That's unbelievable. That's never happened before. And I think he was a FedEx driver. I hope he didn't throw his uniform out.
So future considerations, is that what I'm putting you down for? If he's on the market, if someone's calling Ross about Jose Quaz, maybe cash considerations, what do you think we could get for him?
He could deliver the envelope himself.
Okay, there you go. Okay, I like that idea. Yeah, I said that earlier, Griff. Like 162 games, 30 teams, 130 years of history. When you've done something that no one else has ever done before, and it's a negative thing, you really need to hide for about a week and a half.
Definitely, but I think that is an example to the 93%ers who want to blow this whole thing up.
Yep.
That if you trade Trevor Richards, if you get rid of Genesis Cabrera, if you let Jimmy Garcia go and Chad Green, you're going to have a whole team of Jose Quazes out there. and the Quasimodo would be to do that every night.
Right. Yeah, let's just walk in runs all night and then,
That's why 100 losses might be optimistic if they blow it up.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I know, and this is where there's always a great divide between the fans and management all the time. It's happening with every team in the city right now. I mean, the Leafs are no different, and the Jays, because fans see Baltimore, and that's the team. That, like I said prior to you coming on, Griff, you'd recall this. I mean, Edwin walked them off in 16, and they basically shook hands and said, "All right, we're going to be awful." Both of us for a while. Who can get back to the dance first? And it was the Jays, and the Jays were lapping them in 2021, 22. It was like, look at this. Like, what's Baltimore doing? And
But the
now
thing is,
we know what they were doing.
Yeah, the Orioles and Astros had to go through 4 years of 100 losses to get to where they are because of draft picks and whatever. And the Jays, with the new renovations that Mark Shapiro put into the stadium and the player development complex, they cannot do that. They can't do that because fans won't go. I mean, they'll be high-fiving each other saying, yeah, we like the blow-up, we like the blow-up. Are you buying tickets? Hell no, we're not going to go to it. We're not even going to watch on TV. And when nobody's watching on TV, maybe that's when ownership will react.
That's probably accurate, but I'll tell you what's coming in September if this keeps up. There'll be 12,000 people there, and not going to be a lot of buzz about this team. Yeah,
I mean, they had the Astros. They had the Astros there for 4 games, and on Canada Day they announced 39,000, and there were at least 10,000 empty seats there, and people were trying to explain where these people were. They were in the neighborhoods drinking beer.
Yeah,
but. No, and then the next 3 games were all in the 20,000. So, yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And if they get rid of Bo and Vlad at the same time, I don't see how, with the organization that they have beneath in the minor leagues, that they can change this scenario for at least 3 more years.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, Griff, they're off to Seattle, so enjoy those games, and we'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
There's Richard Griffin of griffthepitch.com. Yeah, that I think Griff, he breaks it down eloquently there, that ownership's going to have final say on that, and owners, they pumped a lot of money into the park, and they want people in the stands, and they want people watching, and that's a big part of the whole programming of the whole company. And yet, fans aren't going to do it if the team's not any good.
What's the underpants cam like on ownership?
I think it's pretty substantial right now.
Very, very significant. Teams in free fall. You pumped all kinds of money into the stadium. You fear now that no one's going to go all summer. I don't know, man. That would be very, very worrisome, even if you have the wealth that that family has.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's still going to work out.
Yes,
for everyone
just for
involved.
the business venture. You know what I mean? Like, you set your business venture back years by doing that, and you're not profiting. And I think when you've gone through the years like 15 and 16, where you experience the windfall and the buzz, and what that carried forth for you for a number of years, it would be a very difficult pill to swallow, knowing that is so far away from you again.
Yep. It appears to be at this point. So we'll see what they do at the trade deadline. That's going to tell us a lot about their overall plans in the future. Come back with our best bets, brought to you by FanDuel. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Looking at the Argos game tonight. And when in doubt, I listen to Korolnik. When in doubt, I listen to Al's brother. I'm on the under tonight. You got backup quarterbacks on both teams. I think both defenses show up to play. 47.5 is the total. I'm on the under. Argos are laying points here. I mean, the Riders getting 4.5 at home. I lean towards taking the points as well, but I'm going to bet the under here. It's 47.5 on FanDuel. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Make the FanDuel Sportsbook app today, or find it today and download it today, and find thousands of ways to play. Please play responsibly. Must be 19 plus. Physically located in Ontario.
Korolnik, he's the CFL whisperer.
Yes.
He knows that league inside out. He could be on the panel with the boys.
No, he's crushing it, man. He did the FanDuel stuff, the preseason stuff, where they were betting all team totals and props, and he was a wizard on that show.
It's a niche market, but he's found a way to figure that out.
Oh yeah,
so
he found it, man. That's If you're looking for numbers and they're out there, you'll find them.
I wouldn't call him the tremendous information like Al's brother, but very similar.
We started the show with Al's brother storming into the studio and defending his brisket take. He's really a strong advocate for brisket because, using his terminology, it's got a high ceiling.
And it's succulent.
Yeah, and it's succulent.
Yeah.
It's succulent, it's tasty, and it's got a high ceiling.
And his cousin makes the best one, apparently.
Evidently his cousin, I guess. And Al's brother claims he can make ribs because he turned the oven on and put ribs in. during the Super Bowl. So,
yeah.
Shout out to wherever he bought those.
Yeah, and Joey Chestnut, 57 hot dogs in 5 minutes. So still gross.
Still the champ, man. That's the thing. It doesn't matter what happened today in Brooklyn. Like there's an asterisk on that. I'm sorry. If the champ isn't there, it's meaningless. All right, Frankie. Good stuff, buddy. Thanks for doing this. Great seeing you as always. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. TV, radio, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.